Journey to Self-Realization by Mr. Jonathan Roof. In the fall of 1971, my life suddenly and dramatically changed. Although I had been striving for spiritual understanding for a number of years, I had little to show for it. I was 18 years old, but I had grown up from the time I was a small child with the spiritual traditions of the East. I had read many metaphysical and spiritual teachings, but they did little to change my life or prepare me for what I was about to experience. But perhaps the unusual upbringing I experienced may have foreshadowed what would change the future course of my life. Off to India to buy the Taj Mahal. Let's rewind to 1955 when my mother and father packed up 3 children under the age of 7 and moved to India for 26 months. Leaving a comfortable living near Boston, Massachusetts, they ventured out on a spiritual quest that each had long dreamed of. My mother's father was one of the 2 co-founders of Sheraton Hotels. So, when my father resigned from his job as director of advertising at Sheraton Hotels, nobody was able to believe the reason for his resignation. My father's co-workers repeatedly pestered him for the real reason for his unusual journey. Finally, in exasperation, he confided to one particularly inquisitive co-worker, after swearing him to secrecy, "I am on a secret mission for Sheraton Hotels to speak with the government of India about buying the Taj Mahal." Although he thought the story was too preposterous to be taken seriously, it soon leaked out to the Boston newspapers. Apparently, people at that time and in that place believed that the purchase of the Taj Mahal by a hotel company was a more plausible explanation for travel to India than going on a spiritual quest. The beginning, my family lived in northern India for 2 years in the mid-1950s. My father was writing a book on Vedantic teachings titled Journeys on the Razor-Edged Path while studying with monks of the Ramakrishna Mission around Kalimpong, near the border of India, Sikkim, and Bhutan. My mother studied Hatha Yoga while in India. Returning to the US in the late 1950s, she began teaching and writing about yoga, health, and diet. My early life was influenced, even if unconsciously, by the quests of my father and mother. I learned Hatha Yoga and astrology from my mother at an early age. I also read about the masters of the East and Theosophy. I read the teachings of the Himalayan masters, Theosophy, Alice Bailey, Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi, the Tibetan masters, Kabbalah, and others. And yet, I did not feel that I had come closer to self-understanding. A sudden awakening in 1971. I was a freshman at Pomona College in Claremont, California. I had planned to study a major in psychology since I had not found the answers that I was looking for in religion or metaphysics. However, a momentous day dawned in the fall of that year. As I stood near the inside door of my dormitory room on the ground floor of Harwood Court, thoughts went through my mind concerning service. I had never really participated in organized service projects, but I was beginning to recognize that service was an inescapable part of a spiritual endeavor. When I finally resolved to participate in a campus program to work at a mental hospital in the nearby town of Pomona, a sudden breakthrough in consciousness occurred at that very moment. As I flipped on the wall light switch, it was like I had flipped on a switch in my mind. Instantly my consciousness shed all worries, and a blissful peace overcame me. I was immediately energized and saw everything around me as though I was seeing it for the first time. The cares of the world slipped from my shoulders, and I felt as though all questions were answered, or more specifically, that there were no questions left unanswered. When the spiritual switch is flicked, Supreme bliss can be experienced immediately. Therefore, the realization of this exalted state, described variously as Brahmanandam, Paramasukdam, etc., can happen instantaneously, without any apparent reason. To have this experience, you do not have to withdraw to the forest as people mistakenly imagine. It can happen to you right here. I could have been standing 2 inches off the floor for the buoyancy and lightness I experienced. I not only felt weightless but also filled with wonderful light. The moment stood still in time as I looked around incredulously. Nothing had outwardly changed in my environment, but everything had inwardly changed. At that moment, I knew that I was experiencing self-realization. I recognized the characteristics of the experience from my readings, particularly in Zen Buddhism. But even in the absence of references, the experience was so powerful and self-fulfilling that I was certain it could be nothing else. In that state, there were no questions or problems, only a remarkable bliss and a lightness of being. A return to normalcy, unfortunately, all too soon, the experience came to an end. It probably lasted no longer than a minute or two, but I was irrevocably changed. I became convinced of the reality of self-realization and the possibility of sudden personal transformation. From that day, no other goal could capture my imagination. I knew that my one goal was to recapture that bliss and equanimity. And thus began the start of a new journey. It has been said that a momentary experience of self-realization might occur as a result of spiritual practices done in past lifetimes. The progress we secure in each passing lifetime is never lost. It becomes a part of our new lives as we resume our journey. Divine vision is the result of practice and of God's grace. At times, divine vision may appear to arise spontaneously, but it is because of work done by a person in a previous life. I did complete the volunteer work at the mental hospital in Pomona that I signed up for. But the will to serve did not reappear to any notable degree until several years later. At 18 years of age, I did not consciously possess the spirit of surrender, for I had no teacher or personal form of God to whom I felt inclined to surrender. Much work remained to be done. However, I did receive some grace from God, from some past spiritual karma, that resulted in a state of mental stillness that briefly revealed to me the Atma. There are 3 kinds of liberation. It is experienced in one type of samadhi, mental stillness. Then, a person who is engaged in sadhana, spiritual discipline, can suddenly, like a flash of lightning, have a clear vision of the truth, but it fades and ordinary life resumes. Liberation cannot be permanent without total surrender. A blockade in 1975, I married Rose, whom I had met during a summer foreign exchange program in Germany when we were 16 years old. The following June, I graduated from Pomona College, and Rose and I moved to Tucson, Arizona. I started a job as a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch, but my focus on spiritual life did not change. I believed that holding a steady job and settling down in my own home would provide the stability I needed to concentrate further on my goal. Most of my effort was to fathom the cryptic teachings and anecdotes in John Blofeld's book, The Zen Teachings of Hoang Pyo. Yet however much I tried to recapture the Satori, enlightenment, experience that I had when I was 18 years old, I was unable to recover that bliss and inner fulfillment. But by 1978, I seemed to have hit a wall in my spiritual practice. No effort or direction of approach appeared to bring me any closer to my goal. I no longer had excuses. I had a home, a job, the time, and silence to pursue the path. But the wall I encountered offered me no path, over, around, or underneath the obstacle of my mind. However, we become eligible for divine grace when we employ our best efforts on the spiritual path and still come up short. The doors to spiritual progress open if we persist with effort and patience. I had reached that point in my journey. A new world in the fall of 1978, my spiritual impasse came to an end. Although I did not recognize it immediately, my life was about to be transformed again. My mother, who had been living in Ojai, California, for about 3 years, came to Arizona to visit her friends, Bob and Barbara Bosney. Their home was about a 2-hour drive from our home in Tucson, so Rose and I drove up to see them on a Saturday. After a pleasant visit, as we prepared to leave, my mother handed us two books, The Holy Man and the Psychiatrist by Samuel Sandways and Sai Baba Avatar by Howard Murphet. Accepting the gifts, we returned to our home in Tucson. After a couple of weeks, I decided to look at these books. I was amazed at the story told in the two books. In all my reading of metaphysical and religious texts, both popular and academic, I had never seen anything so remarkable and heartwarming. I felt compelled to follow up and explore the life and teachings of this seemingly divine master, Satya Sai Baba. What was particularly unusual was that these books touched my heart profoundly. My heart had become dry and lifeless. My spiritual path had always been primarily an intellectual pursuit. But the truth in these books intuitively held me spellbound. The experience of finding a genuine spiritual authority was new and remarkable. A few weeks after receiving the books, Rose and I went on a drive to the Gila wilderness of New Mexico and the White Mountains of Arizona. We spent one night in a small motel in the town of Alpine at an elevation of about 10,000 feet. I had been thinking all day about the stories of this amazing holy man, Sai Baba, and was captivated by the charming way he related to his devotees. Miraculous signs and unusual displays of grace highlighted the stories that extol his love and sweetness. The stories were unlike anything I had read or heard before. Throughout that night, I was unable to sleep. The mantra, Om Sai Baba, kept on repeating in my mind for the entire night. No other thought or word broke the spell, and yet, in the morning, I was fully refreshed. When I got up from bed in the morning, I looked around the small motel room. The curtains, carpet, and bedspread were all orange, the color of Sai Baba's robe. Opening the entry door, I was startled by the beauty of the scene outside. I saw fresh snowfall covering the tall pines of the rural alpine setting, the roads, and the parking lot. Everything was quiet, still, and serene, wrapped in a pristine white blanket of snow. And to me, the world appeared anew. I knew with great certainty that the truth and love that I had newly experienced would transform my life. Again, my life had been changed, this time by the love and grace of Satya Sai Baba, on the morning of 23rd November 1978. It was Sai Baba's birthday. Baba says that the real birthday is the day God is born in our heart. So, I count that day as my birthday too. Proof positive. Returning to Tucson from the White Mountains, I gained a new outlook. The faith and devotion that overwhelmed my consciousness showed me a new dimension to spiritual life. I had always believed that the essential questions in my life would succumb to the rule of reason. The new dimension that now surged from my heart opened the door to show me the closeness of God within. And so, the power of the heart started to transform my consciousness. I had not previously felt a close relationship with God in any form, but now having tasted that sweetness, longed for more. Sai Baba must have looked within my nature and decided that I would need something tangible to hold on to. My nature was pragmatic and analytical. My mind demanded some proof before it would surrender its dominion. Not more than a week or two later, that proof appeared. I had cut a black and white picture of Swami out of the book, Sai Baba Avatar, by Howard Murphet, and placed it in a small plastic frame on my desk. It was a picture I would later learn was taken on the sacred night of Mahashivratri, the annual sacred night of worshipping Shiva. I was drawn to the picture because it reminded me of the images of the Himalayan masters that my mother had on her altar when I was a child. Within about a week of framing the picture, it seemed to have a small smattering of fine grey ash outside the glass frame. This holy ash, called Vibhuti by Sai Baba devotees, is a symbol of Sai Baba's presence and grace. It symbolized the end of all matter, that which cannot be reduced to any further state. It also represents the end of desire and the futility of worldly materialism. I was amazed to see the ash on the front of the picture. Rose too saw the ash and, unbeknownst to me then, even tasted it to be sure it was not dust or incense ash. It was fragrant and clearly not the result of any other cause. It could only be a sign of Sai Baba's presence and grace. Soon after, I decided I wanted a smiling picture of Sai Baba in that frame. I changed the picture but saved the original. However, after about 10 days, I gave away my new, smiling Sai Baba picture to a friend with whom I discussed my experience. So, I put the original photo back on my desk in a nicer frame. After reflecting on the experience with the Vibhuti, it seemed only respectful to keep the picture in a beautiful frame. I purchased a new golden-colored wooden frame with non-glare glass. I acquired some dark green mate boards for the border to secure the photo and create a nicer presentation. I carefully brushed off the image several times. I also meticulously cleaned the frame and the glass to be sure they were spotless. If holy ash appeared again on this picture, I wanted to be sure there was no question of mistaking the sign. I placed the picture beside me on my left side as I sat on the floor. I turned to my right to cut a small piece of mat board with a box cutter. I then removed the center portion of the mat board, where the picture would be secured. Looking immediately back at the picture, I observed a small mound of loose grey ash lying on top of the photo to my left. How could such an event take place in the seconds that I had looked away? I was, of course, wonderstruck by this spontaneous display that I could only attribute to divine grace. I picked up the picture and bent it slightly while tilting it to allow the ash to slide down the center of the picture into my hand. Clearly, the ash could not have been on the picture as I carried it around the house. Nor had it been there when I had set the picture down seconds before. I placed the ash in my mouth and ate it, as is customary when Sai Baba offers it to a devotee in the audience before him in India. This experience was undeniable proof that my rational mind could not ignore or refute. It happened before my very eyes. There had been no one else present to observe or interfere. I viewed the experience as a token of the omnipresence and grace of God, who is with us every moment. It demonstrated that He constantly sees our thoughts and actions and can immediately respond when the time is right. And indeed, if He was in me, then He was also inside everybody else. This was a momentous revelation to me. This experience reminded me of God's immanence within all of us and, therefore, of our essential unity. For the same God resides as a witness and motivator within each of us. This experience also proved to me the amazing grace and compassion of a loving Lord. Why would He show such compassion to a person like me? Certainly, I held no claim to saint lines or even of unusual goodness. But more was to come. A personal invitation. When I told my wife Rose about the appearance of the ash, she said, "Well, that's nice. If Sai Baba sends us a personal invitation, then maybe we should go to India to visit him." The chance of someone on the opposite side of the world sending a personal invitation to someone they had never met before seemed remote to me. We had been to India in 1973 when we were in college, but we did not know about Satya Sai Baba then. We were soon to learn that no obstacles could come in the way of divine will. When all of this was happening, in the late fall of 1978, my mother began planning to take a tour group to India to visit Sai Baba's ashram at Prashanti Nilayam. My mother soon put together a nicely typeset invitational flyer to mail to prospects for her travel group. We received our copy shortly after the second manifestation of Holy Ash. On the top of the flyer's front page, it was written in bold, "This is your personal invitation to visit Satya Sai Baba in India." But, at that time, we had other challenges in planning such a trip. We were both relatively young, just 25, and had neither the time nor the money for the trip to India. However, a commercial real estate deal suddenly came my way at the real estate office where I worked. It was a transaction to purchase 110 acres of commercial land for my employer's client. When the transaction closed escrow, I received a check for $10,500. That was a princely sum in 1978 and was more than enough for a trip to India. Just as I received the check, my real estate broker delivered the shocking message, saying, "You are fired." Apparently, he thought he could get my attention this way and motivate me. I felt, instead, now I have both the time and money to pursue the trip to India. By the end of January 1979, Rose and I climbed aboard a Boeing 747 bound for India to the garden city of Bangalore en route to the little village of Puttaparthi, a remote hamlet in Andhra Pradesh state. Interview and practice. Rose and I soon reached Puttaparthi, located about 114 miles north of Bangalore. We were allotted a small room in the West Prashanti housing block. Near the end of our visit, in mid-March 1979, we were called into the mandir, temple, for an interview with Sai Baba. We were in a group of about 15 to 20 people of different nationalities. During that interview, we had the opportunity to ask a few spiritual questions. I asked Sai Baba if the self-realization experience that I had when I was 18 years old in college was the genuine state of spiritual consciousness that I was striving for. He answered, "Yes." Although I knew in my heart that it was the goal I was seeking, I still wanted him to confirm it. Before leaving the ashram several days later, Sai Baba came out for darshan and stood directly in front of me, granting me the opportunity for Padnamaskar, saluting the divine feet, before leaving. That first of many trips to Swami lasted for 6 weeks and confirmed our hopes and beliefs in what we found. On returning to Tucson, Arizona, I involved myself intensively with the activities of the local Sai Baba Center, participating in service activities that I understood to be key to attaining my ultimate goal. My original self-realization experience had arrived concurrently with the resolution to do service. But, in the excitement and bliss of that initial experience, I had focused on the result and had forgotten the causal part service played in bringing about that state. Soon after that first trip to India, I began serving as an officer of the Sai Baba Center, which started to meet at my home soon after. In the spring of 1979, we held the first Arizona Sai Baba retreat. In 1980, I started a writing project to provide study circle material on Satya Sai Baba's teachings, which later became the first volume of Pathways to God, completed in 1984 and published in 1991. During that time, I attempted to apply myself diligently to understand Sai Baba's message and implement it in my life. I worked with intensity in the hope of regaining the self-realization that I experienced so briefly in 1971. I was convinced of Satya Sai Baba's divinity and was confident that his path would lead me to that goal. I applied myself fully and intensely to serve the Satya Sai organization and self-transformation. I was not worked toward trying specifically to do service. I was only trying to meet the needs of the devotees and the organization in any way I could. Realization of the goal on 30th January 1987. Rose and I stayed in Bangalore at the Taj Hotel on Mahatma Gandhi Road. We drove back and forth from the ashram in Whitefield for darshan twice a day, morning and evening. After visiting Whitefield for darshan that day, we returned to the hotel. Shortly after dinner, I purchased a book in the hotel bookstore titled Be As You Are, The Teachings of Ramana Maharshi by David Godman. I read a statement in the book that suddenly struck me. And I experienced that change of consciousness that I had experienced only once before. I again felt the rush of bliss and light I had experienced as an 18-year-old college student. More than 15 years had passed since that original experience, but the sensations were unmistakably the same. I instantly felt as though my field of vision had widened. I felt light and bright, and time stood still. Again, it was as though I was seeing objects around me for the first time. Suddenly, my entire mental focus changed in several respects. At once, I felt that my consciousness had shifted from being directed toward external objects to being focused within. I could not imagine that I needed anything outside of myself. My center of consciousness also suddenly shifted from the head to the heart. In a flash, all thoughts and desires disappeared. The observer, the act of observing, and the objects of perception became one. Furthermore, after almost constantly yearning for this liberating experience for more than 15 years, that desire too suddenly vanished. I felt connected and whole as I had never felt before. The experience was such a sudden and abrupt change of consciousness that it took my breath away. Having briefly experienced that altered state earlier, I tried to avoid analyzing the experience too much. I did not want to relinquish the experience quickly, as I had done before. I was initially concerned that the experience would not last, but as minutes turned into hours, and hours turned into days, and days into weeks, I became stronger and more confident that the delusion had gone. I experienced tremendous relief and peace upon attaining what I had long sought. Delusion would not return. After more than 35 years until this day, the expanded consciousness of that state has remained with me always. Satya Sai Baba fulfilled my heart's desire on that day. Thus began a new exploration of consciousness that continues day by day. Also, the shift in consciousness to the heart opened up a new way of looking at things. Although the path of wisdom took me to the brink of my goal, the final destination was beyond its borders. It is the heart that is our true guide and source of strength. But the opening of the heart only seemed to start in earnest at the time of spiritual awakening. After that time, the opening of the heart was noticeably accelerated. Several times, I have been asked how I have changed since that day in January 1987. Although little has changed externally in my life, everything has changed internally. I continue to experience progressively less agitation as time goes by. I am less and less prone to react to negative external situations. I experience a greater sense of surrender to the divine will. I also seem to act more and more from the heart than the head. I have also become better able to distinguish between the Atma and the body-mind-intellect, or Anatma. It is, of course, easier to quietly enjoy the bliss of the inner self without attracting attention to oneself. But, if one has truly learned what Sai Baba has come to teach, one must know that we are all one. I would have wanted others to share their experiences of self-realization with me when I was so desperate to know. How could this individual not share with others in a similar situation? Hence, I offer this account of my spiritual journey to Sri Satya Sai Baba and all the fellow spiritual pilgrims on the path to self-realization. The results belong to him. Mr. Jonathan Roof.